I presume you're here in order to learn of Magecraft. I'll have you know, there's no room for the weak-willed in this course, and despite your best efforts, the sorcery of our time is but a fraction of what it once was in the Age of Gods. Much of the craft is established through pedigree, and the culture of mages is riddled with deception and moral depravity. That said, if you insist, I shall do my best to educate you in this miserable, yet fascinating world.
In our previous lesson, I covered spiritrons, which are widely considered to be the future of Magecraft. It is an interesting aspect of the craft because it demonstrates how mages can be innovative beyond their traditional practice. The same goes for today's lesson, heroic spirits. These entities on their own aren't the work of mages, but through complex spellcasting, mages have found ways of harnessing them as servants. Previously, I mentioned heroic spirits with regard to familiars, but now is the time to explore their true nature and how mages have taken advantage of this bizarre planetary system. Thankfully, you should be well informed about our planet by now, namely that the planet's will, Gaia, acts to protect itself from various threats, giving rise to nature spirits like elementals and true ancestors. These forces aim to protect the planet in part from the meddling of humans, and yet, ironically, humans are a part of the planet as well. Thus, we have Alaya, the aspect of our planet's will that works to protect humanity through a power we call the counterforce. With that understanding, it can be said that heroic spirits are spiritual bodies implemented by the planet in order to protect the human order. In many ways, this means protecting humanity from itself, using heroes to avert warfare atrocities that would extinguish us altogether. To our detriment, this also includes preventing mages from reaching the root and obtaining the tremendous power of true magic. Perhaps the greatest threats to humanity, however, are the beasts. We spoke before of divine constructs and the divine spirits they belong to. Alaya grants power to gods and godly artifacts based on human worship, and yet we humans are far from benevolent. We are petty, hateful, and afraid of ourselves, often responding to that fear through oppression and persecution. In other words, humanity has its own evils, and by nature, these evils are impossible to ignore. The beasts of humanity, then, are the manifestations of these evils. They, above all else, spur the counterforce to summon heroic spirits to fight them. It is a threat both birthed from and resolved by humanity. On a more technical level, let us explore what a heroic spirit actually is. If a god or divine spirit can be born from mankind's worship, then it isn't too hard to imagine that heroes in their everlasting legends hold a sort of power as well. Both fame and infamy serve to elevate certain humans above the rest, and Alaya keeps a record of these legends through what is called the Throne of Heroes, a location beyond our world's space and time. In its effort to protect humans, the counterforce will summon these heroes as spiritual beings and task them with fighting certain threats. These heroes can either be people who truly existed throughout history, or heroes merely described in legends with no real-world counterpart. These two types even intermingle, as a famous historical figure may find themselves gifted with new powers or detriments based on how their legends were embellished or dramatized throughout the years. The more ancient or renowned the legend, the stronger the heroic spirit recorded into the throne. Sometimes this recording is consensual, with a given hero pledging themselves to the planet in or at the end of their life. These spirits are utilized as counter-guardians, and are more likely to be summoned throughout the ages. Their jobs often entail assassinating dangerous individuals to turn the tide of history, a burdensome task that can mentally take its toll on a hero. Many heroes harbor regrets, desires they could not fulfill in life, and some use this as a bargaining chip when contracting with the planet. In exchange for a hero's opportunity to pursue those desires, they accept jobs from the planet until their regrets are subdued. The role of hero need not be applied exclusively to humans either, as famous animals, machines, and even concepts can be passed down through human legend. Because the Throne of Heroes exists independently from our temporal axis, it means that heroes of the past can be summoned to the present or even the future. Inversely, heroes who gain fame or contract with the planet in the future may find themselves summoned into the past. Given that we are now talking about time travel, it's worth reminding you that there are various timelines the universe maintains. Theoretically, if a hero from the future becomes recorded into the throne and is summoned to the past, they may find themselves able to change the course of history that originally led to their own heroic deeds and fame. Rather than causing some form of temporal paradox, this simply indicates that heroes are being summoned to and from different timelines. There are certainly cases where heroic spirits we encounter have come from timelines that no longer exist, parallel worlds they can no longer return to. It is worth noting that the worlds I've previously referred to as extra worlds operate in an incredibly similar way, with the moon cell automaton functioning almost identically to the throne of heroes. Naturally, there are some differences between the two, but that is not the focus of today's lecture. Ironically, the Throne of Heroes, despite existing to prevent evil, also records the legends of famous villains or anti-heroes. This is because, despite their evils, these spirits still have their use. While rare, villains have on occasion saved people through their villainy. In other cases, their intentions may be pure, but their actions corrupt. Regardless, their fame is just as potent, and under the right context, they may choose to help humanity rather than condemn it. A process also exists for summoning heroes who traditionally aren't famous enough to manifest on their own. Rather, by combining various smaller legends into a single entity, a composite heroic spirit known as a phantom spirit can be summoned. This process needn't be limited just to phantoms, however. High servants are also heroic spirits comprised of various legends, not necessarily weak ones. Despite being called spirits, these heroes are not invincible when summoned. While their bodies are indeed material, this is only a projection fueled by mana. As such, servants don't require food in a traditional sense, so long as they have means of replenishing their mana. When a heroic spirit's body is damaged, it may indeed show on their body, but what truly receives damage isn't the body at all. Rather, it's their spiritual core that truly matters. When a hero's recording in the throne manifests in the world as a heroic spirit, their form is built upon a spiritual core that serves as their foundation. These cores are the key parts allowing heroes to manifest, and should they be destroyed, the heroes lose their bodies and must return to the throne. This means you cannot necessarily tell the vitality of a heroic spirit from the state of their body. Damage that looks severe may not be, and by the same token, damage doesn't need to be visibly apparent to be fatal. Quite similar to the spiritual core is the Saint Graph, which can be metaphorically likened to a heroic spirit's heart. It contains a spirit's various properties, as well as the memories they gain while summoned. It is another aspect of a heroic spirit that, when damaged, can prove fatal. In the case of composite spirits such as high servants, their various components all share a single Saint Graph. The highest rank of heroic spirit is the Grand Servant, a position reserved exclusively for heroes thought capable of opposing the beasts. Their potential strength is on an entirely different scale than conventional heroes, implying that the typical heroic spirit may actually be restrained from using their full might. Technically, this means that Grand Servants have a stronger Saint Graph than other heroic spirits. While this has reduced the power of most spirits, it has also allowed for a larger variety of heroes to qualify as the planet's protectors. Naturally, candidates able to become Grand Servants have more strict requirements. Mainly, they have to be considered the strongest beings of their respective eras. The different classes of heroic spirits also have their own unique requirements. Casters, for instance, must possess potent clairvoyance. Despite being the ultimate protectors of humanity, a condition required to hold such power is to only serve Alaya, never using their full potential in service of any one group or individual human. This means that Grand Servants cannot use their greatest abilities to aid organizations like Gaia, even though Gaia also fights to protect humanity. The moment a Grand Servant does so, they lose their Grand status and become substantially weaker thereafter. Inversely, a Grand Servant can indeed assist Gaia, so long as they do so at standard capacity. Thus far, we have spoken of heroic spirits with regard to their primary use as humanity's protectors. However, when devising methods of reaching the root, mages have found ways of using heroic spirits for their own individual gain as powerful familiars. It is in this context especially that we refer to a heroic spirit as a servant, a familiar of the highest rank. Put bluntly, when mages summon servants, they are abusing the counterforce, using it to summon heroic spirits from the throne of heroes, and then using their own mana to tether these spirits to our world. In this regard, servants are only familiars in name, as they can easily overpower their masters. Mages have developed complex command spells to control their servants, but those are limited in both number and scope. They are better used in cooperation with a servant as additional power, rather than against them. As such, most servants contract with their masters for mutual benefit, rather than blind subservience. This is sad, given that the original purpose of servants was inherently exploitative. The Heavens Feel ritual, also known as the Holy Grail War, was a process designed by the Ainsburn, Makiri, and Tosaka families as a means of reaching the root. They would use an enormous spell called the Greater Grail to essentially trick the counterforce into helping mages summon servants. The planet does most of this work, putting down the required mana to comprise the servant spirit cores. The mages only need to maintain that connection. The idea of pitting servants against each other for the chance to obtain the Holy Grail as a wish-granting device was only an excuse to gather mana. The Grail they fought so hard to obtain was nothing more than a receptacle for mana that collected the servants before their fallen bodies could return to the throne. Certainly, this gathered mana would prove useful to the surviving masters and servants, but mages hoping to reach the root would be doing so by standing upon and crushing the hopes and dreams of their servants. Thankfully, this is not the only means of summoning and utilizing servants. The Chaldea Security Organization, for instance, built its own system for summoning servants known as Fate. Far more robust than Fuyuki's Greater Grail, Fate allows Chaldean masters to summon and maintain multiple servants at a time. Rather than for selfish gain, these servants are used for their original purpose, protecting the human order. This means that even heroic spirits summoned by the counterforce may find it beneficial to contract with a Chaldean master, as their goals are more or less the same. Chaldea even keeps its own record of servant saint graphs, allowing for repeated summoning of the same servant should their core be destroyed. Sadly, there are also servants summoned to the planet's detriment, with beasts of humanity like Getia planting their own holy grails into history for what we consider to be nefarious means. As previously stated, heroic spirits are more or less limited in their potential when summoned. One of these limitations is a servant's class, which helps narrow down the scope of their abilities. By default, there are 7 main classes: Saber, Archer, Lancer, Rider, Assassin, Caster, and Berserker. A heroic spirit may qualify for multiple classes based on their legend and abilities, but when summoned as a servant, they are typically limited to just one. Each class has its own strengths and weaknesses, such as archers possessing independent action from their masters, and assassins possessing presence concealment to compensate for their weaker combat prowess. Sabers and lancers specialize in close-range combat, while casters benefit from being able to establish their own territories. Riders, of course, are summoned alongside their famous mounts. The class system is not set in stone, however. There have been instances where mages or other entities have summoned servants into unique classes, and other cases where an unclassified servant is designated a class for the sake of formality. These are the extra classes, and while we've encountered the likes of rulers, avengers, alter egos, foreigners, shielders, saviors, gunners, and even fakers, there really is no limit to how many classes may emerge in the future. In exceptionally rare cases, a servant may possess a skill that grants them effective use of 2 classes, even though officially they are only 1. Oftentimes, servants may choose to go by these class titles rather than their true names, in order to conceal their identity. Knowing a servant's legend can prepare opponents not only with advanced knowledge of their abilities, but also any major weaknesses. The most famous of these would be Achilles, a hero legendarily invincible, with the exception of his mortal heel. In some cases, servants may even want to hide their identities from their own masters. After all, even if a servant is typically summoned in their prime, they may still retain weaknesses indispensable to their legends. In general, servants are able to hide their physical bodies by entering spirit form, which is useful for mages who want to conduct their affairs discreetly. After all, Magecraft is meant to be kept secret. A servant's physical body can be quite peculiar, in that parts of the body may remain in the world long after returning to the throne of heroes. So long as enough mana is provided, even something like a servant's arm or leg can remain from a fallen servant. While extremely dangerous given the compositional structure of a servant's body versus a human's, it is technically possible to transplant a servant's appendages or organs onto a human host, allowing them to survive while inheriting severe side effects. For instance, because heroic spirit Emiya is compatible with his human counterpart Shiro, it is possible for Shiro to live on using Emiya's arm. Without a mystic code like the Shroud of Martine, however, Shiro runs the risk of having his body torn asunder by Emiya's inhuman might. The same can be said for the homunculus Sieg, who inherits the heart of the servant Siegfried. While this grants Sieg the power of a servant, it takes its toll by slowly converting the boy into a dragon. Other bodily peculiarities include a servant's need for mana. Once summoned, they are generally dependent upon their master's mana, and without it, they may resort to consuming mana through other means such as bodily fluids and human souls. While they don't need to eat, servants can still derive some small amount of mana from doing so. Because this food is converted into mana, servants have no need to expel waste, but they can find themselves under the influence of alcohol or other toxins. While they need not sleep, they can choose to do so as a form of mana conservation. During this process, dreams serve as an intimate way for masters and servants to inherit each other's memories. With enough mana, it is possible for servants to remain in the world and essentially live a second life. This can be done by powerful mages, and in other cases, servants can find themselves reincarnated as mortals, only requiring mana to access their servant abilities. In order to function as humanity's protectors, heroic spirits are given basic knowledge of the time to which they are summoned. This includes any human languages spoken in that era, making servants multilingual. This also includes knowledge of the Holy Grail War, but sadly not the war's true purpose. It is said that servants lose their memories after being summoned, but we have evidence to believe otherwise. Servants occasionally recall their past incarnations as moments of déjà vu, or in the case of Chaldea documenting spirit graphs, servants can accumulate memories so long as those graphs remain intact. There are also certain instances where a heroic spirit may share their saint graph with a human vessel. Demi-servants, for example, are humans who can utilize the power of heroic spirits. Pseudo-servants are a similar case, where a heroic spirit possesses a human's body. Most frequently, this is done so that gods, who are normally too powerful to be contained in a saint graph, can still manifest as servants by using a human vessel to limit their divinity. Each instance of these servant-human hybrids is unique, with the servant's consciousness either controlling, deferring to, or merging with their human hosts. Another anomaly with servants is that they can be summoned in different forms, with exaggerated or isolated parts of their legends. Namely, this is seen in altar servants, who are heroic spirits summoned with shifted powers and personalities. For the altars, this shift tends to be more malicious. Lily servants, on the other hand, are a more youthful variation of a given hero, and are often more innocent. Through Chaldea's fate system, servants can even alter their own saint graphs, effectively allowing them to change classes. Lastly, I wish to speak of how a servant is actually summoned. Because the counterforce is responsible for much of the work, a proper ritual for summoning a servant isn't always required. In such cases, mages, even those who have no clue of their magical lineage or potential, may wind up summoning servants that are most compatible with their nature. A major factor that determines which servant a master summons is a catalyst, an object or artifact tied to a given hero's legend. It's worth noting, however, that, with or without a catalyst, there's no guarantee a master and their servant will get along, even if their personalities wind up being similar. Thus, the summoning ritual itself merely gives a master more control over the resulting servant. It is through the ritual that a mage can modify the nature of their servant, such as aiming for an altar form or adding madness to them. The quality of the ritual can affect the quality of the servant, which is why some mages conduct the ritual when their magical potential is at its peak. The formal chant allows for these modifications, but all that is really required is a master calling out for help nearby a magic circle. Chaldea's fate system is special, in that it utilizes Galahad's shield, Lord Camelot, which was made from the Round Table, a place known to be where heroes gather. In that regard, Galahad's shield is a portable summoning terminal, requiring only a potent mana ley line to function. In summation, heroic spirits are the recorded legends of heroes throughout history, summoned forth by the planet to protect humanity against threats, the largest of which being the beasts of humanity. This system the planet uses has been hijacked by mages in order to summon heroic spirits as their own familiars. While at first deceitful, mages have found ways of harnessing the power of servants toward mutually beneficial goals. By protecting the human order, servants have found their summons to be a welcomed chance to address the shortcomings of their lives. For many, it is a chance for redemption or further glory. Now, one thing I have intentionally avoided discussing is a servant's greatest strength, their noble phantasms. I've held off on this, in lieu of discussing it in our next lesson. Thanks for watching!
If you enjoy this channel, help us grow by liking, commenting, sharing the video, subscribing to OtakuDaiKun, and
most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all of our anime discussion, lore, or Let's Play content.
You can support us directly through Patreon, Subscribestar, or our YouTube membership, all of which come with benefits like exclusive vids and early access.
As always,
Celebrate your fandom!